Hello, this is your host, Jigme, and welcome to the Jigme Show, a podcast where I sit down with speakers, singer-songwriters, musicians, sports personalities, actors, radio broadcasters, and a slew of many other professionals from a broad range of fields. This news conversation, author and staff writer for The Athletic, Joshua Kloke, provides his outlook on the growth of Major League Soccer, top players signing in Saudi Arabia, future of Toronto FC, and more, as well as the latest buzz in Leafland. Now, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Hello, Joshua. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. How are you today?
I'm doing well, and I think what a weekend of Super Bowl festivities that are happening now, and obviously the big games that are happening with the Chiefs and the Ravens there, and then you saw the Lions and the 49ers, and I mean, did anybody see that coming from the 49ers, that comeback when they were down early to the Lions, and what a run they've had, and I know that they blew that lead, but I mean, did you ever see that coming from the 49ers to pull that off? I guess late in that game, especially in that second half.
Well, if I'm being honest, you're probably asking the wrong guy. My hard drive space for the NFL is pretty limited. As you can tell by what I'm wearing, I'm more of a European football guy. You when you have a kid at home and you try and balance the work and life, you got to pick and choose like how much sports you watch. I was watching a little bit. I was watching some of the second quarter, and yeah, it looked like the Lions had kind of put them to bed. And if I'm being honest, my wife and I were kind of watching and having a conversation about the Lions and how they seem to be this team that at least outsiders, like my wife kind of had forgotten about. She's like, the Lions, where are they from again? And which I guess speaks to the Lions in a broader scale. But no, I didn't watch the end. I didn't see the comeback. I'm sure there's people more astute than me that can, describe why that happened. But I guess you get I was watching the first game, most of the first game, and you get Taylor Swift in the Super Bowl, and I think that probably makes a lot of people at the NFL happy. That's my take. That's a completely unoriginal take, but that's where I'm at with the Super Bowl.
For sure. And I guess they could just swap out the Super and the Super Bowl title and just put Swift Bowl, because I guess 2024 will be the Swift Bowl theme to the whole thing. And I guess now that we're actually going to be talking about soccer, and I know because you're a big fan, I know that you cover it a lot, especially when it comes to Toronto FC and sort of Canadian soccer in particular. When you look at this TFC team and you see how they're built, and they have players like Insigne and Bernardeschi, and one moment they had Mimo Crescito, who went back to Genoa. Um, when you look at this team now, the way that they're constructed and the players that they have, especially the young and upcoming DeAndre Kerr and players like that, what do you see in in this team now compared to that team when they won the MLS Cup years ago?
Well, they certainly don't have as balanced a roster as they did in 2017. And what they certainly lack are players with MLS experience. I remember talking to people around the club in 2015 and 2016 when, they couldn't get over the hump, 2016 in particular. And it was clear that the team had understood that they have, high-end stars. And you go back, like they had that three-headed monster of Javinko, Bradley, and Altidore, which, I hope we kind of appreciate as a real force in Toronto sports history. But the club realized they needed to bring in players that understood MLS. They had game breakers. They needed players that understood MLS, understood the travel, understood the schedule. And that's when you look at Stephen Beitashour, Drew Moore, even like Clint Irwin, guys like that, who they felt they needed to bring in players, not necessarily around the margins, but were kind of right on par in terms of importance, right? They knew that Altidore and Javinko would be able to score. But they needed players who could, usher in young guys and just provide stability. I just don't feel that the stability and the MLS experience is in that roster right now. And you could go, even further back, like you're looking at again, Eric Zavaleta, Nick Hagelin. Those were players that had a really important role on that 17 team. The MLS experience isn't there on this team. When it came to roster building a few years ago, I think Bill Manning in particular really wanted to go in on high-end stars that would bring fans to BMO Field. We've seen the result of that kind of top-heavy approach, and it's difficult to build a roster, so it's a work in progress, but I think that's the biggest difference. Now they have these high-end stars, but it's a very top heavy roster. And I think that next step is going to be to figure out A, how to bring along some of the young players and B, how to find more players with MLS experience.
For sure. And I guess also the whole thing with the MLS this year, and you're seeing it with obviously with the additions that people are making now and teams that are making with obviously Lionel Messi coming over to Major League Soccer from his club in PSG to Inter Miami to now you're seeing Luis Suarez arrive to join that force of Messi, Busquets, and now Alba. And the Barcelona guys are now reunited all in one place. And now that you're also seeing Saudi Arabia, you're seeing players of high stature go to Saudi Arabia to play as well, who followed Ronaldo to that direction as well. I mean, Karim Benzema went there and Neymar and now you're seeing sort of the growth of Saudi Arabia football now slowly increase. But
Mhm.
now also you're also seeing that effect of I guess players who don't want to be in Saudi Arabia after they made the move there, because now we're seeing Karim Benzema sort of regret the move that he's made there, and now he's wanted to come back over and play back in European football and maybe even English football in the Premier League, I've heard. What do you make of this whole thing about Saudi Arabia and these big star players come to Major League Soccer as well?
Well, I mean, until we do see a player of real stature going from Europe to Saudi Arabia, then to MLS, I'll kind of believe it when I see it. We haven't seen a real, prime example of that yet. Look, it happens in pro sports all the time. Players are sold a bill of goods, they go to a place. It doesn't go as planned once you actually get your boots on the ground. The difference, I think, in North American sports is that you don't have to then travel across an ocean to find a new team. You ask for a trade or whatever, and you just stay within one league. Um, I think MLS is becoming an increasingly kind of interesting proposal for a lot of high-end players. But I say that with an asterisk. I think that yes, obviously Messi is the prime example, but we can look at, players like Insigne as well. And there are high-end players that have come to MLS, but those players have gone to very specific markets, right? I think when we look at MLS, I think if you're a player, an elite, player who's played in Europe and you have an interest in North America, I hope I'm not generalizing, but it's usually in places like Los Angeles or New York, places where your brand can find a home and you could take advantage of other sponsorship opportunities that perhaps you couldn't in some of the mid and lower tier markets in MLS. To bring it back to Toronto FC, one thing they did very well when they were building a championship roster was they catered to players with families. That was a genuine part of their recruitment strategy because they knew that Toronto is a safe city, is a clean city generally, with great education opportunities. And so if you're a player that is, in your late 20s, early 30s, and you have a family, you maybe aren't as interested in, some of the typical things that LA, Miami wasn't there at the time, but Florida, um, and New York can offer in terms of nightlife, that kind of thing. And that's why they were able to bring the likes of Drew Moore and Stephen Beitashour to Toronto. So, and that Javinko as well, and that holds for Bernadeschi and Insigne, both of whom have children. So you are going, if you're MLS and you're those teams, you have to understand that, LA, the two teams in LA and Miami and New York, they will have a bit of a competitive advantage in terms of recruiting players. It's whether or not some of the mid and lower tier teams in smaller markets can attract players. What are the things that they can offer as a city that, other cities who have the opportunity or who can present opportunities to increase a player's brand, what can those smaller cities offer? And that's where you need really, really intelligent, people in front offices. Like, I don't think it's a surprise as well when we look at some of those smaller markets who have teams that are succeeding. Look at Columbus, MLS champs. Look at who's at the helm there. Tim Bezpachenko and Corey Ray, who were at the helm of Toronto FC's 2017 MLS Cup win. So that's going to be important too in terms of attracting big name talent. But it's coming, right? Antoine Griezmann is one player that I suspect is in MLS sooner rather than later. And it's just going to take more and more players for that wall to be broken down, I guess.
Absolutely. And I guess in terms of what you're hearing in terms of the players that could be on the move to MLS from big clubs like Atletico Madrid and La Liga or leagues outside, do you hear something on Antoine Griezmann that you suspect that he will be arriving in Major League Soccer rather soon?
No, it's just what I've read. That's all. And I just think that he's alluded multiple times that he loves the NBA and he loves the North American lifestyle. I don't have any inside intel whatsoever. I'm not, a Spanish or La Liga reporter. I just think that, it's trending in that direction given what he said publicly, and that's all, we can go on right now.
For sure. And I guess now that we've talked about soccer, I want to talk about the most important team and I guess the most concerning team of all, is the beloved Toronto Maple Leafs, I guess. Um, and I want to talk about them because they're not only a cause for concern, but they're also a team that takes you on a roller coaster ride through each game and each season. Um, and it seems to happen quite frequently, and we're seeing it now again, this time this season. They've had a rocky start and they came flying out of the gates, and then sort of they weren't expected to play this good to start the season, and then sort of they hit their wall and they started to lose games and they started to hit a losing streak, and now people are calling for the firing of Keefe, and people are saying that this guy should be replaced by Craig Berube, and who could be next as their head coaching duties. When you look at this team, and I don't want to harp on some of these players, but there's been a huge concern with Ryan Reeves, who hasn't really been effective as of late. And I know, yes, he scored the goal that was a big goal in Winnipeg the other night, but we also have to talk about the inconsistency with this roster and the way it's built. This roster right now is not built for the playoffs. Would you agree with that? Because this whole thing with the defense has been poor as of late, and there's nothing to sugarcoat that, and I think that's blatantly clear on people. What do you make of this roster construction this season? Do you think there needs to be more tinkering happening before the deadline or after the deadline? What do you make of this roster?
Well, lots to unpack there. I mean, I think first things first, when you talk about, Sheldon Keefe and Craig Berube and people are calling for, like, I just think we have to be, or I shouldn't say we, I just think I try to be a little more careful of what people shout into the ether on Twitter. Like, you can look at Blue Jackets Twitter, you can look at, Anaheim Ducks Twitter, you can look at Dallas Stars Twitter, and you will always find people online who are upset about something. It's very easy to get negative when there are no repercussions online. So Like I don't know. I wouldn't put too much stock in what a lot of people say online, right? If you do that, it becomes very easy to you know, fall into just the giant sentiment that a large group of angry people have, right? Like you can watch a Leafs win, you can watch a convincing Leafs win, and you can go on Twitter and you can find people still upset. It doesn't mean the Leafs played poorly, and I don't think what people say on Twitter should be an indictment of, an organization. Do fans have, the right to be critical, when they're paying money? Yeah, that's the nature of it, right? But I don't know. Are like, so there's that. And like in terms of the roster, like have some of the signings, especially the marquee signings, have they not gone as well as hoped? Sure. I think Tyler Bertuzzi, could stand to produce more offense. I think Max Domi could probably stand to produce a little bit more too, right? And those are two of the biggest name signings. The defense, I think it was always kind of labeled as a work in progress. And I do think, the defense as constructed requires some upgrades to play, or just to prepare for, yeah, that playoff style of hockey, that kind of shutdown style of hockey that I think you've outlined. Um, so yeah, I think they're improving. I wouldn't. I think there are players on the roster that probably deserve, longer looks, and I always think that there's the first course of action when you're trying to improve a roster is to examine what you have internally first before just trying to trade away assets. And I know when you talk about inconsistency, I think Timothy Liljegren has had an up and down season, but I think he's a player that generally is trending in the right direction, and I think he probably warrants a longer look. And I think Nick Robertson is another player who is trending in the right direction and deserves another look. He's not a defenseman, but like I guess the question was like, does this roster? I think the question was, does this roster need to be improved? Sure, every roster needs to be improved. It's just whether or not Leafs management believe they want to part with their most prized and most in-demand assets to improve that roster, right? Kyle Dubas in the past went all in on a few teams, in particular last year's team, the 2023 playoff team and the 2021 playoff team stick out as teams that he went all in on because he felt at the time those teams offered the best chance to win playoff rounds. And certainly that team in 2021 in the Canadian division and that pandemic season, that team had a very clear path towards the final. And yeah, Dubas went all in last year, Ryan O'Reilly, Noel Acciari, other players, because he thought this team could win and they won a playoff round. I guess the question is, does this team feel that they have a good enough shot to go deep and should they add? And are they willing to part with their assets? And I don't know if the Leafs have the answer. Leafs management, I don't know if they have the answer to that question yet. We're still over a month away from the deadline, and I think there's still some answers to kind of reveal themselves, I guess.
For sure. And I guess this whole thing with the Leafs with this Leafs team, and I know that people will complain about it, but when you look at their records, and I know that yes, they haven't really gotten to first place. Well, I mean, they did, I think, in the Canadian division, they did. That was the only time they won the North Division. Um, I mean, when you look at their records and their past ones, well, starting from the year that Matthews debuted for the Leafs. They had 2016-17 season, they had 40-27 and 15. Then they won 49-26 and 7, 46-28 and 8. And now the recent years of 54-21 and 7, 50-21 and 11, and now 2023-2024, they're in progress. But in that past season, they had 111 points, and that came with flaws as well. Like there was no sugarcoating it as well. They had flaws in every single season, and yet they still put up a 100-point season, and they're still a good team. And they'll find a way to win. Now The thing I want to point out here as we're gonna wrap up, I really want to, I can't stress this enough, but yeah, they got off to a really rocky start, and yes, they've had a roster that's not very, I guess it's not nearly built for playoff hockey, but there's still time. There's lots of hockey left to play, and I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if you look at the Edmonton Oilers. Yeah, they fired their coach, but their coach wasn't really the reason, I don't think, that they were so bad. I think it's because their top players didn't want to deliver in those moments for their coaching people. And Jay Woodcroft will get another job somewhere. He will, I guarantee it. Um, but the thing that stands out about this Leafs team is that they're gonna find a way to go on a run here sooner rather than later. They're gonna find a way to go on a run because they have Joseph Wall coming back from injury. And that's gonna be a big boost for this team. Yeah, they lost Calle Yarncroc. But do you see Joseph Wall sort of being that savior, but also Ilya Samsonov holding the fort down and balancing sort of the wins and losses now that he's playing well and got his groove back in him again?
Yeah, yeah, few questions there. I mean, we don't know. No one knows, or no one can accurately predict whether they're going to go on like a run. I think that, the kind of up and down nature of this team, just in terms of what they've shown us in the results, I wouldn't kind of guarantee that they would go on any sort of run. The thing that Joseph Wall, I'm a big, believer in Joseph Wall, but he's also coming off an injury that can really limit a lot of mobility for a goaltender. And I think, the Leafs are concerned about giving too much too soon in terms of ice time to him, because the nature of an ankle injury, and again, the nature of the movement in the position dictates that, you don't want to aggravate the injury. A goaltender's movements are can be very erratic as opposed to a skater's movements, which are, a little more predictable. So I don't know if Joseph Wall is going to come back and just play as well as he did before. It would be nice to think that he would, but we'll see. I think Ilya Samsonov doing what he's done in the last 3 games has, bought them some points in the standings. But again, like, goaltenders are voodoo. My editor has always said that, and I agree. Like, it's really outside of, like, I mean, how many elite, completely dependable goaltenders are there in the NHL? 3, 4, right? It's just such a difficult position to predict. So I don't, as big of a believer of Joseph Wall as I am, I wouldn't put all my chips in on him saving the Leafs season because of the injury, because of the nature of the position, and because of the fact that he's one piece of the puzzle. So we'll see. So I don't think it's a guarantee they'll go on a run, but I do think getting the goaltender tandem that they want back in the saddle certainly gives them, a little more confidence than they might have had a few months ago.
Absolutely. As we're wrapping up here, last thing, I guess you look at Austin Matthews this season and the pace that he's on to record 70 plus goals now. He's got 46 games played, and he missed one game because he had the flu bug. And he has already 40 goals before the month of February. He's got 18 assists for 58 points, and he's a plus 14. He's got 5 game winning goals, and he's got 2 overtime goals. He's got shots on goal 198, and he has a 20.2 shooting percentage. His time on ice is 21-14. Faceoff percentage is 53.0. I mean, that is just all positives for Austin Matthews all around. I think nobody was surprised if he were to have a breakout year again and score 70 goals. I mean, do you think you'll get there?
70 goals is a lot. I don't even know if we can call it a breakout year. Year after year, he's just shown that he's probably the greatest goal scorer, since Alex Ovechkin. And certainly, becoming the greatest Maple Leaf of all time. 70 goals is a lot. I don't know. It feels like he'll get close, but 70 is going to require him to just play through. Like he's already played a lot of hockey. He's not getting, a lot of time off with the All-Star break here. He's going to be an All-Star and he's going to be the center of the festivities in Toronto. February hockey is a grind, right? Players are tired. Players have bumps and bruises. I'm always wary of how any player can produce consistently during that stretch. If anybody has it in them to, hit 70 and make me look foolish, it would be Austin Matthews. But we throw out these numbers, 70 is now the number. Okay, fine. But like that's not, if he scores 65, that's still incredible. If he scores 60, that's still incredible. He's doing, the hardest thing in hockey to do, which is score goals consistently. So whether it's 70, whether it's 65, whether it's 60, which is still remarkable, I think and I just mean people who watch the Leafs should appreciate what we're seeing because talent like his is generational. And it's here and then it's gone. So I think if nothing else, maybe put the numbers aside and just appreciate what we're seeing because players like him don't come around, very often. He can change the game in a way, a small handful of players in the NHL can. And just from an entertainment perspective, that's important and it's just fun to be a part of and watch.
Certainly, and I guess the professional women's hockey league, what a start they've already had and a historic season already, and they're already selling out crowds, and now they're gonna have a 3-on-3 showcase, which I'm really excited to see, and I'm curious to see if Sarah Nurse will recap that redo the whole Peter Forsberg attempt at the 3-on-3 showcase again. I'm really curious if she'll do that because I remember at the last All-Star game. She went in and she pulled off a Forsberg and she gave a little chuckle at the camera and that was the highlight of that All-Star. But I mean, it's been great to see the level of excitement from all men's and women's. I guess to see the Women's Hockey League now coming to fruition and Billie Jean King and everyone who took part in making that happen. Good on you, and we're excited to see the level of the excitement that it builds on. But I mean, it's the end of our time together, but thank you so much for speaking with me. It's been a pleasure to recap this whole thing with soccer and the Leafs. And I hope you really enjoyed my conversation with Joshua Kloke, the author and staff writer for The Athletic. You can reach Joshua on his socials. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, feel free to share with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating or review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow the show on all social media platforms. I've been your host, Jigme saying thanks for tuning into the show.